An alien visited Earth 2,000 years ago, and humanity mistook him for a god. He came not in fire or thunder, but in silence, walking beneath ancient skies when the world was still young and waiting to remember itself. Some called him divine, others impossible. But what he left behind was not legend, it was code, buried deep within every human being, waiting for the moment we would finally awaken. Tonight, that story will unfold. A story erased by empires, hidden by faith, and now resurfacing through science and dream alike. If you're hearing this, you're part of the few meant to remember. So, before we begin, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who still believes the universe hides its truths in plain sight, and subscribe so these forgotten revelations keep finding you. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Because as we return to the desert where it all began, the light that fell 2,000 years ago is falling again. 2,000 years ago, something entered the world that was not meant to be remembered, at least not in the way history remembers kings and wars. It came not with thunder or conquest, but with silence. No armies saw it, no empire recorded it. Yet for a brief moment in time, a light touched the earth that would echo across continents, carved not into monuments, but into memory itself. In a night unmarked by calendars, shepherds along a desert ridge saw the stars bend, as if the heavens themselves had drawn breath. There was no sound, only the stillness that comes before revelation. Then a shimmer, faint at first, then growing until it consumed the horizon. The next morning, across lands separated by oceans and mountains, people told the same story in different tongues, that a figure of radiant light had appeared among them. He did not claim divinity. He did not seek followers. He simply walked through villages, across rivers, through markets where beggars and priests alike fell silent at his passing. Those who saw him could not describe his face, only the feeling he left behind. Some said it was peace beyond comprehension. Others said it was terror, because it reflected everything hidden inside them. Whatever he was, he left behind no trace, but changed lives and trembling hearts. In the years that followed, records emerged across the world, fragments of stories etched into clay, inked onto scrolls, whispered into myth, a luminous man in the East who healed with words, a stranger in the West who spoke of unity and the music of the stars, a teacher in a forgotten valley who told his listeners that light lived inside all things. Scholars would later dismiss these accounts as folklore-independent myths born of imagination. But the timelines matched too perfectly, the patterns too precise. Something had visited this world, and the world, not yet ready, tried to bury the evidence beneath religion and reason alike. For every temple that worshipped him, another sect condemned him. For every scroll that tried to explain him, another burned in the name of orthodoxy. He became a ghost in the foundations of civilization, present everywhere, claimed by none, but in secret chambers of forgotten libraries, in tablets that never saw daylight, his message endured. A message not of salvation, but of resonance. He spoke not of heaven or hell, but of frequency and consciousness concepts far beyond the language of his age. He had come not to rule humanity, but to remind it of something it once knew before time itself forgot. And then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. No grave, no farewell, no trace. Only questions scattered through centuries like seeds waiting to awaken. Something descended from the sky 2 millennia ago, and what it left behind would one day force the world to remember what it tried so hard to forget. Across the silent corridors of time, buried beneath the weight of empire and the decay of translation, a pattern begins to emerge. In the deserts of Judea, in the temples of India, and in the stone cities of Mesoamerica, separated by oceans and centuries, the same story was written in different tongues. Each civilization spoke of a being not born of their bloodlines, not claimed by their gods, yet remembered with the same trembling reverence, a figure of light who came from the sky and spoke of unity. The scribes of Judea described him as a man whose eyes held the dawn, one who spoke of oneness between heaven and earth. Far across the world, priests in ancient India recorded verses of a luminous traveler who taught that the soul and the cosmos were reflections of the same eternal field. And deep within the jungles of the New World, the Maya carved images of a tall being surrounded by light, offering knowledge that would one day return when the stars aligned again. At first, historians dismissed these tales as coincidences, myths born from humanity's shared fascination with the heavens. But when the scrolls were compared, the symbols matched. The gestures of light, the pattern of the hands, even the sequence of 7 points surrounding the figure identical in 3 continents that had never met. The timelines, once thought to belong to isolated cultures, now converged on the same narrow window of history, 2,000 years ago. Something happened then, something too immense for the human mind to comprehend and too dangerous for those in power to acknowledge. The event was erased not through fire or war, but through reinterpretation. Myths became religion. Religion became control. And the truth was sealed beneath centuries of doctrine, forgotten by design. Yet fragments survived. A broken inscription found in an Indian cave spoke of the luminous teacher who descended when the sky trembled. A Mayan codex described the God who walked as man, whose body sang. In the Dead Sea region, a lost gospel fragment simply read, "And the light walked among them, and the world knew him not." What if these were not metaphors? What if they were reports, eyewitness accounts of the same being, visiting different civilizations, teaching the same truth under different names? The further one digs, the clearer the pattern becomes. Wherever he appeared, art flourished, wars paused, and after he left, civilizations rose rapidly, as if some dormant potential in humanity had been awakened for a brief and fleeting moment. Then, silence. Every culture that remembered him eventually fell. But before collapsing, each left behind the same prophecy, written in different languages, but with identical meaning. He will return when mankind once again forgets the light within itself. What history calls myth may be the record of an encounter deliberately buried by time. The forgotten event wasn't the birth of a religion. It was the visitation of something far older and far more human than divinity itself. Night in the desert carries a silence that feels eternal, the kind that presses against the skin and fills the lungs with stillness older than the world itself. Over the Dead Sea, that silence once broke not with thunder, but with light. The air grew heavy, charged with something invisible, something alive. The shepherds who watched the horizon that night would later say the stars seemed to move, that one of them fell without falling, drifting against the constellations like a thought breaking free from the mind of the universe. The light descended slowly, not blazing, but pulsing, like a heartbeat echoing through the sky. It moved with intelligence, pausing above the salt plains as if searching for something or someone. No sound came from it. No roar of flame. No wind. Only a hum that could not be heard, only felt. Animals stirred in their pens. Water rippled though the air was still. The earth seemed to breathe. And then, the light touched down. What followed cannot be found in any scripture written by kings or prophets. The record exists only in whispers, preserved in the oldest scrolls that the world has forgotten how to read. They speak of a man who was not a man, stepping out of the heart of that light. He was tall, slender, wrapped in a glow that was neither fire nor reflection. The very air bent around him, like glass bending around heat. His skin, if it could be called skin, was pale like the inside of a pearl, but transparent enough to shimmer with something moving beneath, like liquid energy. In his hands, he held a crystalline object, small enough to fit within his palms, yet vast in its presence. Inside, it swirled colors that did not exist on Earth, forming shapes that shifted like thought itself. Those who saw it could not look directly at it without trembling. Some said it was a vessel. Others believed it was alive. The ancient texts simply called it the heart of memory. When the light faded, the night returned, but it was no longer the same night. The sand retained a faint luminescence for days, and where the light had touched the ground, the salt crust had melted into perfect glass. The shepherds who tried to speak of what they saw were silenced, their words dismissed as madness. Yet their children carried the story quietly across generations. Something had come to Earth not as conqueror, not as deity, but as messenger. The Dead Sea became the first mirror of heaven, and what walked out of that light carried with it the memory of a world far older than ours. The descent was not a beginning, nor an ending. It was a reminder that we were never alone, and that the stars had been watching all along. The boy's name was Eliab, and he was no one history should have remembered. He was young, barely into manhood, a keeper of sheep along the quiet ridges near the Dead Sea. He had seen the storms that rolled like living creatures across the horizon, had heard the whispers of wind moving through broken stone, and knew the silence of the desert so deeply that any sound, any tremor felt sacred. But that night, when the light came, it was not like any storm he had ever seen. It was gentle, deliberate, and impossibly alive. From his perch among the rocks, Eliab watched the glow move across the valley floor, pulsing softly as though the earth itself had begun to breathe. His flock was restless, pressing against one another in silent panic. Yet the boy felt something different. An unease, yes, but also a strange calm that grew stronger the closer he came to the source of the light. He could not explain why his feet moved forward. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps destiny, perhaps something older, calling him by a name the universe had known long before he was born. When he reached the basin, the glow was no longer distant. It stood before him, a figure human in outline but too perfect, too weightless, as if sculpted from the breath of stars. The being radiated warmth, not heat but presence, and in his hands he held the crystalline object that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, like a living heart made of glass. Eliab's lamb, a frail, dying thing he had carried with him for days, lay limp at his feet. The stranger turned toward it, the light around him bending, shifting like water in motion. The boy would never understand what he saw next. The being knelt and extended one hand over the lamb. The light that emerged was not bright, but deep, an illumination that revealed more than it burned. The creature's touch rearranged matter itself. Muscle healed, bone reformed, the faint spark of life returning where moments before there had been none. The lamb stirred, stood, and pressed itself against Eliab's leg as if waking from a long dream. In that moment, fear vanished. What replaced it was reverence, a recognition older than thought. The being rose, and the air around them shimmered with the residue of impossible energy. Eliab understood nothing, yet somehow everything. He felt the boundaries of the world widen, as if the desert had been only the edge of a much greater horizon. He returned to his flock before dawn, silent, trembling, unable to speak of what he had seen. But something within him had changed, and that change would ripple outward in ways no one could foresee. He would become the first witness to a truth humanity would spend 2,000 years trying to remember, that the divine was never meant to be worshipped from afar, but rediscovered within. That night, beneath the silent stars, the fate of mankind shifted, not through conquest or revelation, but through a single act of healing witnessed by a shepherd no one thought would matter. When the light spoke, it did not use sound. There were no syllables, no vibration of air, only an awareness that slipped into Eliab's mind like thought from a place beyond thought. It was communication stripped of language, truth delivered without words. And in that voiceless moment, he understood something that every scripture and philosophy, would spend millennia trying to explain and failing to preserve. Everything is connected, and compassion is the alignment that allows all creation to remain in harmony. The message came not as a command, but as resonance. It rippled through the space around him, through the sand beneath his feet and the blood in his veins. He felt the stars above answer, their distant light trembling as though acknowledging the same frequency. The being was not teaching a belief, it was restoring a memory of what humanity once knew before it forgot, that existence is vibration, that emotion shapes matter, and that consciousness is the current binding it all. Eliab could not understand it then. To his simple mind, the vision was overwhelming, impossible to translate into words. Yet the feeling imprinted itself deep within him like a seed waiting to bloom across centuries. The truth would fracture, echoing through time in distorted tongues. It would become the foundation of parables, hymns, and doctrines that spoke of love and oneness, stripped of their original meaning. The words compassion and light would survive, but their essence would be buried under ritual and rule. What had been frequency became religion. What had been resonance became prayer. The crystalline object the being carried pulsed brighter as if agreeing with its own message. Within it shimmered patterns, waves folding into waves, infinite reflections of energy becoming form. The light it emitted was alive, yet not burning. The color changed with every heartbeat of the earth, from silver to gold to something beyond both. Eliab felt that if he reached out to touch it, the universe itself would shift. When the being's presence finally dimmed, the message lingered. It vibrated in the air like the fading tone of a struck bell. Eliab did not know it then, but those silent words would cross generations, whispered in the dreams of mystics, mirrored in the verses of prophets, and echoed in the experiments of scientists searching for the origin of consciousness. Each would interpret it differently. Some would call it divine revelation, others would call it madness. But the truth was neither miracle nor myth. It was physics of the soul, spoken once to a shepherd who could not yet understand it. Everything is connected through frequency. Compassion is alignment, and somewhere in the quiet between stars, the universe still hums that same forgotten phrase, waiting for humanity to remember what it really means. In the days that followed the descent, word spread quietly, carried by traders and wanderers through the barren valleys and over the salt flats. They spoke of a being made of light, a presence that healed the sick and spoke in silence. Curiosity grew in the hearts of those who claimed wisdom, the priests who read the stars, the mystics who sought truth through isolation, the scribes who built meaning from words. One by one they came, drawn by something that neither power nor gold could offer: understanding. They found the visitor where the desert met the water, standing motionless, his glow subdued as if in mercy to human sight. Around him, the air vibrated with something that could not be measured but could be felt, a calm that stretched into eternity. The men approached with reverence but also with fear, clutching their scrolls and questions as if knowledge could shield them from revelation. When they spoke, their words tangled with the limits of their language. They asked who he was, from where he had come, what God he served. The visitor did not answer in the way they expected. His response was not doctrine but observation. He spoke of the universe as a single living organism, of consciousness as the energy that gives form to matter. He told them that love was not a feeling born of flesh, but a force that aligned reality itself, the same principle that holds stars in orbit and atoms in balance. Love, he said, was not moral or emotional, it was physics. The listeners could not contain what they heard. They tried to shape his words into the molds of their beliefs. To the priests, he sounded like a blasphemy. To the mystics, he was confirmation of what they had glimpsed in meditation but could never prove. To the scribes, he was impossible to record. His ideas refused the structure of sentences. They wrote what fragments they could, and even those fragments would later be altered, rephrased, softened for fear of heresy. But for a moment, in that gathering beside the still waters, something extraordinary happened. The visitor raised his hand toward the horizon, and the wind shifted not violently, but as though the world itself had exhaled in comprehension. The men felt their hearts vibrate with a rhythm that wasn't their own. For the briefest instant, they understood that they were part of the same field of existence he described. Then, the moment passed, and confusion returned like a tide reclaiming what had been revealed. Centuries later, scholars would discover scattered writings from that meeting, lines about light, unity, and the geometry of compassion. They would argue endlessly over their meaning, never realizing that the truth had not been spoken for the mind to analyze, but for the soul to remember. What those men witnessed beside the Dead Sea was not a sermon. It was a glimpse into the machinery of creation, explained by a being who saw no boundary between science and spirit. And though they failed to understand, the resonance of his words continued to ripple through time, waiting for a world capable of hearing them again. Power has always feared what it cannot own. Word of the radiant visitor began to drift beyond the barren hills, carried by rumor, confession, and awe. What began as whispers among shepherds soon reached the marble halls of authority, where truth was never welcome unless it could be controlled. The priests heard of him first. They called secret councils beneath torchlight, their voices trembling not from disbelief, but from recognition. If his words were true, then their scriptures were incomplete. If his presence was real, their power was an illusion. The visitor had spoken of unity, of the divine existing within every living thing. To rulers and clerics, this was not revelation, it was rebellion. A world without intermediaries meant a world without chains. And so, in scrolls that never reached the public eye, the order was written. The being of light was to be found, questioned, and if necessary, erased. Soldiers were sent under the guise of restoring order, their swords carried not for war but for silence. Across the desert towns, his name became forbidden. Those who had seen him were threatened or bought into denial. The priests rewrote the story, turning the luminous teacher into something safer, either a spirit to be worshipped from afar or a deceiver to be condemned. History would later call this a heresy, but it began as fear disguised as faith. Power could not allow a truth that made it irrelevant. Yet those who had stood before him remembered something the swords could not cut through. The feeling of peace, the soundless pulse that had filled the air when he spoke. They carried that memory quietly in their hearts, passing it through families like a secret prayer. And as power sought to bury his presence, his message grew invisible roots beneath the surface of civilization. It is said that when the soldiers finally reached the valley where he had been, they found no camp, no body, no trace, only the faint smell of rain on dry stone, though no clouds hung above. The sand shimmered with light even after sunset, as if the ground still remembered what it had once touched. In their reports, they described him as a threat, a wandering sorcerer, a man who claimed the heavens spoke through him. None of them admitted the truth that haunted their dreams long after, that in his presence they had felt something ancient watching through his eyes, something not foreign, but achingly familiar. Power would spend centuries rewriting his story, turning his name into myth, his message into doctrine, and his memory into control. But the visitor had known this all along. Misunderstanding was not failure, it was the only path through which the truth could survive. For he understood that fear, too, was part of the resonance. And, in time, even those who tried to destroy him would unknowingly preserve the seed of the message they sought to erase. The first to witness what they called miracles were the ones who least expected wonder. Villagers who had lived their whole lives measuring reality through hunger, illness, and dust suddenly stood before a being who reshaped the boundaries of existence with the calm of one pouring water into a cup. To them, it was divine power. To him, it was the simplest expression of understanding a quiet mastery of the hidden mathematics behind creation. They said that when he placed his hand over still water, it glowed softly, not like fire but like memory. The light rippled outward, reflecting colors that did not belong to earth. It was as if the water remembered something ancient, something before form and name. When he touched the sick, their pain faded not through command, but through harmony. The vibrations of his presence adjusted the frequencies of their bodies, aligning them to the rhythm of life itself. To the dying, it felt like peace. To those who watched, it was a new kind of terror, because what he did defied the rules that had defined the human world since its beginning. What the people called healing, he called resonance. What they named miracles, he understood as science uncorrupted by limitation. He knew that every atom was a note in a grand song, that disease was discord and emotion could alter matter. Through compassion, he tuned life back to its original pitch. Each act that astonished the crowd was not an act of power, but of remembrance, reminding the universe of what it had forgotten how to be. The priests who saw him perform these wonders were torn between worship and accusation. Some knelt, believing they had seen the face of the divine. Others called him blasphemer, a manipulator of forbidden forces. The soldiers who followed the priests recorded the events, but the official scrolls would later omit them. Power could not risk a truth that made the miraculous measurable, that suggested heaven itself could be studied, understood, even replicated. The air around him carried that same hum, a faint vibration that made the world seem sharper, more awake. Stones glimmered faintly at his passing. Animals approached without fear. Even storms changed direction, as though the elements themselves recognized their origin. For the few who looked past awe, there was something unsettling in his calm. He never sought followers, never accepted worship. Every time the crowds began to gather, he would disappear into silence, as if to remind them that divinity was not spectacle, it was alignment. What he carried was not the magic of gods, but the blueprint of creation itself, a knowledge so old that humanity had mistaken it for myth. And yet, he knew how it would end. Knowledge given too early becomes heresy. Power misunderstood becomes fear. As his light touched the world, he felt the frequency of resistance rising in response. Still, he continued, because even if they forgot his name, even if his science became scripture, the resonance he had set in motion would never stop echoing. It would hum beneath time, waiting for the day when humanity would finally recognize it for what it truly was, not miracle, but memory. There are moments in history so quiet that the world forgets they ever happened, yet everything that follows bends around them. The night the being prepared to leave was one such moment. The desert was asleep, the sky silvered with 1,000 unblinking eyes, and in the heart of that stillness stood Eliab, trembling before a light that was fading. The luminous visitor, who had spoken in thought and healed through vibration, now held in his hands the crystal that pulsed like the heartbeat of creation itself. It was small enough to rest in a child's palm, yet the air around it seemed to hum with the gravity of stars. Inside its depths swirled patterns that no human language could describe, geometries that shifted with intention, colors that were not colors, but frequencies of consciousness condensed into light. To Eliab, it was terrifying and beautiful all at once, like holding eternity trapped in glass. The being regarded it with the tenderness of someone cradling a living thing, then turned to the boy. In a silence that spoke deeper than any sound, the message was placed within him. Humanity, the being said, was not yet ready to see without fear. The crystal held knowledge far beyond the limits of its current age, knowledge of energy, of resonance, of creation itself. If revealed too soon, it would not enlighten mankind but destroy it. Power without understanding always devours the hand that holds it. The task was simple yet immense. Guard it. Keep it hidden until the species learned again to perceive without the filter of greed and control. Eliab felt the weight of generations pressing upon him as he accepted the artifact. It was warm, alive, almost breathing. For an instant, he saw flashes within its core, visions of futures yet to come. Cities of light, machines that thought, oceans choked by smoke, humanity reaching for the heavens again and again, still blind to the frequency that bound them to the cosmos. Then the visions faded, and only the faint glow remained. When dawn approached, the being's radiance dimmed into the rising sun, until the desert could no longer tell where one light ended and the other began. Eliab wandered for hours until he found a circle of standing stones older than memory itself. Beneath them, he dug. The sand was cool and dry, the kind of silence that keeps secrets well. He placed the crystal inside, covering it with layers of rock until even the wind forgot the place. No conqueror would find it. No empire would claim it. The ages would rise and fall, and the earth would turn countless times before another would touch that sacred glass. But somewhere beneath the shifting sands, the heart of resonance still pulsed, waiting for humanity to remember the promise it had forgotten, that true vision begins only when fear ends. The night before he left, the air was unnaturally still, as if the entire desert had paused to listen. The stars above hung lower than usual, their reflections rippling faintly across the black mirror of the Dead Sea. The scent of salt and dust mingled with something faintly metallic, something that did not belong to Earth. There was no sound of wind, no shifting of sand, only the faint hum of a frequency too deep for human ears. It was the farewell note of a being who had never truly arrived in the way humans understood arrival. At the first whisper of dawn, when the horizon began to blush with light, the visitor began his walk into the desert. Those who had followed him in secret from the nearby village watched from a distance, their bodies trembling not from cold but from awe. He walked barefoot upon the sand, and with each step, the ground shimmered faintly, as if it remembered the passage of something beyond mortal weight. He did not look back. There was nothing behind him to return to, only the fading echo of what humanity could not yet understand. The light that had once radiated gently from his skin began to intensify, but not as fire consumes or as lightning strikes. It was softer, slower, like dawn awakening from within. His form was still visible, the outline of shoulders, hands, and the faint curve of a face that seemed both human and not. The people watching would later describe it as a man walking into the heart of the sun, though it was not the sun he entered, but something older, the source of it. The sky itself responded. Colors rippled in silence, blending gold with violet, red with hues unknown to human sight. For a brief moment, the air between heaven and earth became transparent, revealing something vast beyond it. Those who witnessed it would swear that they saw patterns moving in the light, shapes that resembled wings, spirals, constellations forming and dissolving in the span of a breath. The being's steps grew slower, lighter, until his feet no longer touched the sand. He was not rising. He was dissolving, particle by particle, frequency by frequency, his body unraveling into vibration. To the witnesses, it looked like ascension, a holy man returning to the realm of gods. To him, it was simply homecoming. He was not leaving this world, but returning to the field from which all worlds are born. In that merging, he did not disappear. He became everywhere. The light of dawn absorbed him, but the air retained his resonance. It lingered in the wind, in the faint shimmer of water, in the trembling of leaves that had yet to grow. The earth had been changed by his presence, though the change would take millennia to reveal itself. When the final trace of his form vanished into the expanding sun, the silence broke. Birds began to sing. The first breeze in hours whispered across the valley, carrying grains of sand that sparkled faintly like ground glass. The few who had watched fell to their knees, not because they understood, but because something within them had recognized the truth the soul of the world had just exhaled. For days afterward, the desert retained a strange luminosity. The rocks where his feet had last touched bore faint outlines of light that no shadow could erase. Shepherds spoke of hearing music beneath the wind, a deep, slow rhythm that felt more like heartbeat than sound. Scholars in later centuries would dismiss these tales as myth, yet none could explain the small region where compasses failed and the air shimmered faintly under sunlight. Eliab, who had once been a boy but now carried the gravity of something far older, returned often to that place. He would sit in the silence, close his eyes, and feel the hum still alive beneath the sand. He knew the visitor had not vanished. He had simply become what he had always been, a part of the resonance itself, folded into light, patient, waiting for the day humanity's frequency would rise high enough to hear his voice again. And when that day comes, the world will not call it a return. It will call it remembrance. For what left in light at dawn never truly left at all. Centuries began to wash over the earth like tides over forgotten shorelines, erasing the footprints of the being who had walked in light. Kingdoms rose and vanished into dust. Faiths built upon older faiths. Languages twisted into new tongues, carrying faint echoes of something once pure. Yet beneath the layers of conquest, translation, and decay, the same story persisted. It surfaced like a recurring dream scattered across civilizations, each culture remembering a fragment, each text whispering a name that time tried to bury. In the lands once ruled by Rome, the Gnostic Gospels spoke of a luminous stranger called simply the Bright One. They wrote that he appeared not in glory, but in silence, revealing to a chosen few the secret that heaven and flesh were made of the same essence. His words were stripped from official scripture, deemed too dangerous, too liberating for minds bound by dogma. The priests burned the parchments, but they could not burn the memory. Fragments survived, buried inside clay jars and desert caves, where the sand guarded truth better than the sanctuaries of men. Far to the east, along the banks of the Ganges, the sutras told of a radiant teacher who descended from the sky, teaching monks that compassion was the vibration that held the universe together. The old Sanskrit texts described him as neither God nor man, but as a bridge between the two, a traveler of worlds who appeared when consciousness on earth began to dim. His presence was marked not by miracles but by alignment. Crops flourished where he walked. Water became clear. The sick awoke, not cured by divine will, but harmonized by the frequency he left behind. Across the ocean, in the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, the Mayan codices recorded the visit of a tall being of light who came from the heavens riding the wind. They called him Kukul, the feathered light, and said he taught the sacred geometry of creation, the spiral of life that connects all realms. When he left, he promised to return when the cycle of forgetfulness reached its darkest point. Later generations carved his image into temple stone, mistaking science for divinity, and built their faith upon the memory of his departure rather than the meaning of his words. Every record told the same story under a different name. The one who came from the stars, who spoke of unity, who vanished in light. Across continents and centuries, they all described the same patterns, the same message encoded in different metaphors. Yet scholars, blinded by separation, studied them in isolation. They saw myth instead of mathematics, poetry instead of physics, devotion instead of data. Empires fought wars to claim truth, not realizing they were all fragments of the same broken mirror. The visitor's teaching, scattered across civilizations, had become religion in one land, philosophy in another, and legend in the next. Each culture translated resonance into ritual, replacing the living vibration of his message with words that no longer sang. And yet, the pattern refused to die. Hidden among the ruins, in half-burned scrolls and crumbling stone carvings, were the clues to something vast. Each symbol, each parable, was a frequency, a tone frozen in matter, waiting for minds capable of hearing again. What humanity called lost records were not lost at all. They were sleeping. The Bright One had never intended to be worshipped. He had intended to be remembered through recognition. But as centuries passed, memory hardened into myth, and myth into mystery. The records waited beneath the earth, beneath language itself, humming faintly with the same rhythm that once filled the desert skies. And though no one could yet translate it, every fragment carried the same silent truth. He would return not when the world prayed for him, but when it learned once more to listen. By the 4th century, the world had changed. Empires no longer looked to the heavens for meaning. They looked to them for conquest. Power had become a religion in itself, and truth was now a tool measured by how well it served the crown and the altar. Councils of men gathered in candlelit chambers to decide what humanity would remember and what it would forget. History became an instrument, and the past a kingdom to be rewritten. In those councils, words were weighed like weapons. Scrolls that spoke of luminous beings from the skies were quietly removed, labeled heresy, their authors condemned to silence. It began subtly, with mistranslations and omissions. Then it became deliberate. Phrases that once described travelers of light became metaphors for angels. Teachings that spoke of vibration and resonance were simplified into commandments. The cosmic truths that had once united faith and science were buried beneath ritual and fear. The relic, the crystal heart once entrusted to Eliab, was said to have vanished during this era. Some claimed it was hidden by monks, who still remembered the old stories. Others believed it was taken by the same men who sought to erase its origin, sealed in vaults beneath cathedrals, where light could never touch it again. Official records made no mention of it. What had once pulsed with the heartbeat of creation was reduced to myth, a forgotten relic of a forgotten visitation. But absence has a strange power. The more humanity forgot the visitor, the more it longed for something it could not name. Across continents, people began to dream of beings descending from the stars. Painters depicted them as divine messengers. Philosophers spoke of ideal forms that existed beyond the material. Mystics heard harmonies in the silence of prayer. The visitor's resonance, though erased from words, continued to hum beneath thought itself. Meanwhile, religion hardened into structure. The councils that once claimed to preserve truth now defined it. The mystery that was meant to liberate became a doctrine that confined. They replaced experience with obedience, vision with hierarchy. The message that all life was connected through frequency became a forbidden idea. Anything suggesting that divinity could exist within rather than above was branded as rebellion. The world had chosen to worship the memory of light instead of becoming it, yet the erasure was imperfect. Truth, when buried, does not die. It waits. In remote monasteries and secret chambers, fragments of older texts survived. They spoke of a visitor from the stars who walked among men, who spoke of compassion as alignment and light as knowledge. Scholars who found them centuries later dismissed them as apocryphal fantasies, but in those fragile pages, in the faint ink and fading symbols, the heartbeat of the forgotten story still pulsed quietly. Humanity forgot his name, his face, his origin. But it never forgot the hunger for the infinite, for connection, for the feeling that once radiated from a being who had spoken not to the mind but to the soul. The councils succeeded in burying the record, but not the longing. Across ages and empires, that yearning would grow, whispered in prayers, sung in cathedrals, painted on ceilings, where mortals tried to touch the divine. The erasure was not the end of his presence, it was its transformation. In forgetting the visitor, humanity began the long journey toward rediscovering him within itself. The councils of men had won the battle for history, but not for memory. Beneath the weight of silence, the light still waited, patient, knowing that no truth can be destroyed, only delayed until the world is ready to see again without fear. In the spring of 1947, a shepherd wandering the limestone cliffs near Qumran stumbled upon a cave while searching for a lost goat. The story, as it would later be told, sounded ordinary, almost too ordinary to conceal the magnitude of what he had found. Inside that cave lay the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient manuscripts that would rewrite parts of biblical history. But hidden beside them, among shards of pottery and dust older than empires, lay something else, something metallic, something that did not belong to any known age of man. At first glance, the fragments looked like thin sheets of corroded silver, their surfaces etched with symmetrical grooves and faint geometric engravings. The shepherd thought they were treasure, perhaps coins or ornaments left by a forgotten tribe. But when the archaeologists arrived and tested the material, their instruments faltered. The metal did not register correctly on their scales. Its density was unfamiliar. Its composition resisted classification. When light struck it, it refracted in ways that defied the known behavior of alloys. It shimmered with colors that changed depending on the angle of thought more than the angle of light. The fragments were quietly removed from the excavation site before the press could notice. Official reports mentioned only scrolls, pottery, and parchment. The metallic shards were stored in sealed crates marked religious artifacts and sent to laboratories under Vatican supervision. Only a handful of scientists ever saw them again, and those who did spoke of the discovery in whispers, their eyes haunted by wonder and caution in equal measure. One researcher, an isotope specialist from Geneva, allegedly performed spectral analysis on a sliver smaller than a fingernail. The results, according to a single surviving memo, indicated isotopic ratios not consistent with any terrestrial metal. The oxygen signatures suggested formation in a low-gravity environment. In simpler terms, it had not been made on Earth. The memo disappeared days later, and the scientist resigned, citing personal health. He never published another paper. The Vatican declared the find anomalous and sealed it in the secret archives, where countless relics of unexplained origin rest beneath the watchful silence of history. No public mention of the material has ever been made since. To this day, the official narrative remains that the only discovery in those caves was a collection of ancient Hebrew manuscripts. Yet among a few circles of historians and physicists who have seen the declassified photographs, the question lingers. Why did the metal bear symbols identical to those found in Mayan codices and Indian sutras thousands of miles away? The answer, though hidden, hums beneath the surface of every page of history. The isotopes were not the real discovery. They were only confirmation. What the shepherd unearthed that day was a fragment of something far older, a piece of the crystalline relic once entrusted to Eliab 2 millennia earlier. The same frequencies encoded in its atomic lattice were later detected faintly in the surrounding rock, as if the Earth itself had absorbed its resonance over centuries. No one spoke of the light that flickered inside the shards when touched. No one dared to ask why the air around them felt charged with static, or why nearby instruments behaved as if caught between dimensions. The Vatican's silence was not ignorance, it was protection, or perhaps fear. For in that quiet discovery near the Dead Sea, the past had reached forward and touched the present, reminding the world of a truth it had labored to forget. Some say the fragments still pulse faintly in their sealed chamber beneath Rome, responding to unseen frequencies that sweep across the solar system every few decades. If that is true, then the relic has never been silent. It has only been waiting like a signal buried beneath centuries of static calling to those ready to listen. And when the world finally remembers the language of light, the rediscovery of 1947 will no longer be anomaly, but prophecy fulfilled. In the winter of 1962, Dr. Aaron Halevi sat in his laboratory, surrounded by oscilloscopes and aging particle detectors, when the letter arrived. It bore no seal of institution, no return address, only a wax insignia pressed into cream-colored paper, the mark of a cross intersecting an eye. The handwriting was immaculate, written in the deliberate strokes of someone accustomed to secrets. The letter invited him to Rome, not as a scientist, but as a witness. The sender introduced himself only as the archivist. Aaron was a physicist known for his work on subatomic resonance patterns, the kind of mind that believed energy could one day be read like scripture. He had spent years studying harmonic fields, chasing a theory that consciousness itself could alter the behavior of particles. His peers dismissed him as imaginative. His superiors considered him brilliant but unstable. Yet here, in a letter that smelled faintly of age and sanctity, was an invitation that promised confirmation of everything he had ever suspected. He arrived at the Vatican under moonlight, escorted through corridors that seemed to pulse faintly with the memory of prayers long forgotten. The archivist met him deep within the catacombs, his face partly hidden beneath the hood of a scholar's robe. Without introduction or ceremony, he led Aaron into a chamber lit by a single lamp that flickered like a living flame. Upon the marble table before them lay a case small, metallic, and sealed with symbols identical to those Aaron had once seen only in esoteric geometry. When the lid opened, Aaron expected relics of faith. Instead, he found fragments of something else, shards of transparent crystal, impossibly thin, arranged in circuits so intricate they seemed woven by light rather than crafted by hands. When he leaned closer, the pieces began to hum. A vibration so soft, it was felt more in the chest than in the ear. The archivist spoke quietly, explaining that these fragments were recovered near Qumran in 1947 alongside the Dead Sea Scrolls. No laboratory could explain them. No historian could translate their markings. They emitted frequencies that fluctuated in perfect harmonic ratios, as if tuned to the mathematical constants of creation itself. Aaron touched one of the shards. The room trembled faintly. For a fraction of a second, the sound deepened into a tone that seemed alive, an unspoken chord that resonated through every atom of his body. That night, he dreamed of light. It was not blinding or distant, but warm and sentient. In the dream, a man of luminous skin stood within that radiance, eyes reflecting stars that moved like living equations. The being spoke his name without sound, Aaron. It was not an address, but a recognition, as though the universe had suddenly remembered him. He awoke, drenched in cold sweat, his instruments flickering erratically, readings spiking beyond measurable range. For days, the dreams returned, each time clearer. The figure called him to listen, not with his mind but with his atoms. Aaron began to record the hum of the shards, discovering that each emitted a slightly different pitch, yet together they formed a perfect harmonic scale, a symphony written in light. The archivist, watching from the shadows, seemed unsurprised. He told Aaron that centuries of scholars had studied the fragments, but none had responded to them. "It is not science they seek," the archivist whispered. "It is memory." Aaron did not understand then, but he would. For every night thereafter, the voice in his dreams grew stronger, closer, and more human. Within weeks, he would no longer question if the glowing man was real. The data, the patterns, even his own heartbeat began to align with the same frequencies emanating from the shards. The world around him seemed to pulse in rhythm with something vast and ancient. The physicist who had once sought proof of consciousness in matter was now being shown that matter itself was consciousness condensed. And somewhere beyond the veil of sleep, the luminous man waited, whispering across the bridge between worlds, a voice both alien and achingly familiar, calling Aaron toward the same resonance that had once spoken through the desert thousands of years before. In the depths of his laboratory, surrounded by a labyrinth of wires, resonators, and aging oscilloscopes, Dr. Aaron Halevi had begun to lose his sense of time. Days bled into nights, and nights became endless corridors of light and sound. The fragments from Qumran rested on a vibration platform before him, each shard placed precisely according to the harmonic ratios he had spent months calculating. Every attempt to decode their mystery had led him deeper into a riddle of frequency and form. He knew he was close, but not to what. He had learned that the shards responded faintly to certain tones, humming back like strings acknowledging their own melody. Most frequencies yielded nothing but faint flickers of light, small bursts of electromagnetic noise that faded as quickly as they appeared. But there was one number that had haunted him since the second week of his research. The number that kept reappearing in his data, in his dreams, even in the whispering voice that spoke from the edges of his consciousness. 432. He tuned the resonator carefully, hands trembling. The frequency generator stabilized, emitting a pure, low vibration. The sound was not loud, yet the air itself seemed to grow heavy. Every instrument in the room registered motion, each crystal responding as though remembering something long forgotten. The shards began to hum in unison, aligning into harmony. The pitch deepened, richer, more alive. Then it happened. A pulse of light erupted, not blinding, but immense. The air shimmered as though time itself were rippling. From the space above the crystals, a shape began to form, first translucent, then radiant. Aaron's breath froze. The figure was tall, human in outline, luminous from within. It was the same presence that had appeared in his dreams, now standing in the waking world, woven from photons and resonance. The instruments around him shut down, unable to measure what was happening. The light condensed, and the laboratory fell silent, except for a single voice that spoke without sound. "I am Thallon," it said, not with words, but through the vibration of being itself. The message entered him directly, bypassing hearing and thought. Humanity is ready. The tone of the voice was both infinite and familiar. It carried no emotion, yet it was filled with something beyond feeling, a kind of compassionate precision. Aaron understood that the words were not merely communication, they were transmission. Embedded within them was information, a living pattern unfolding inside his mind like a code awakening. Images flooded him. He saw ancient deserts, luminous cities suspended in air, oceans glowing with crystalline structures beneath their waves. He saw Eliab, the shepherd boy, kneeling before the same light centuries ago, receiving the same presence that now stood before him. The resonance intensified. The walls seemed to dissolve. For a moment, the entire room became weightless, as if gravity itself had bowed to the frequency. The crystal shards floated upward, forming a spiral of light around the projection. Aaron felt his pulse sync with the rhythm heartbeats, aligning with the vibration of the world itself. It was not music, yet it carried harmony. Not language, yet it conveyed understanding. The being's gaze, if it could be called that, rested upon him. The code was never hidden. Thallon's voice resonated. "Only forgotten. You are not chosen. You are remembering." The message faded, but its echo continued in every particle of the room. The light folded inward, collapsing into a single beam that sank back into the crystal fragments. The resonance ceased. The hum was gone. The world was quiet. Aaron collapsed into his chair, his mind echoing with what he had witnessed. On the screens behind him, all instruments recorded the same impossible reading. Energy output infinite. Origin unknown. He stared at the crystals, their glow now dimmed, yet pulsing faintly as if breathing. He realized they were no longer inert artifacts. They were awake. Somewhere deep within the Vatican archives, silent alarms flickered across dormant systems. In the following hours, transmission signals were detected across frequencies, long thought unusable, their origin traced to no known source. A resonance of 432 Hz rippled faintly across the planet, undetectable to most, but felt by a few, those who dreamed of light, those who still remembered. In that moment, Humanity's long-forgotten conversation with the stars began again. The silence of 2 millennia was over, and the voice of Thalon had returned. The light did not fade when the voice spoke. It deepened, expanding until the laboratory itself ceased to exist. Aaron could no longer tell where his body ended and the air began. The sensation was not of being transported, but of being remembered, like a memory unfolding inside him that had always been there. The resonance from the crystals pulsed through every cell, and the walls of reality became transparent. He was no longer in a room, he was inside the frequency itself. What he saw was not a vision in the ordinary sense. It was history retold by light. Before him stretched the earth, but not the earth of his time, an ancient world untouched by cities, smoke, or steel. Across its surface, beings of radiance moved like the wind across water. They were not physical in the way humans were. Their forms were suggestion, their presence more felt than seen. They walked among the first humans, appearing in dreams and dawns, teaching through vibration rather than word. Aaron watched as fire was born, not as invention but as communion. The beings showed early tribes how to harmonize with the elements, how sound could shape reality and intention could alter matter. Music, language, and rhythm were not human discoveries but gifts encoded reminders of the resonance that linked all life to the same cosmic frequency. He saw the first cave paintings, glowing faintly as if still alive, symbols drawn not merely as art but as waveforms to communicate with the unseen. Then came the building of the first great civilizations. Thalon's voice guided him through them, a presence both infinite and intimate. Aaron saw luminous teachers walking among the Sumerians, showing them how to align architecture with the stars so that each temple became a tuning instrument for consciousness. He saw Egypt's pyramids glowing under moonlight, not as tombs but as harmonic amplifiers channeling frequencies from the heavens. He saw the Indus Valley illuminated with soft light, where monks meditated in circles that pulsed with unseen power. Across oceans, he saw the same. Beings of light standing beside the Olmecs, carving symbols that mirrored the same geometry found in the stones of the Nile. Everywhere, the same message repeated, echoing across continents and centuries. Creation was not divine accident, nor biological coincidence. It was memory, rediscovering itself. Humanity was never alone. It was never created. It was continued. Then Thalon's voice came again, clearer now, vibrating through the fabric of the vision. "We did not create you," it said. "We remembered you." The words resonated with such depth that Aaron felt his consciousness fracture, not from pain but from revelation. He understood, with terrible clarity, that humanity was not a separate species, but a branch of the same luminous consciousness condensed into form. The beings of light were not gods, they were ancestors who had not forgotten what humanity was destined to become. The visions shifted again. He saw wars igniting, towers collapsing, knowledge sealed and forbidden. Each era followed the same pattern: guidance, awakening, corruption, and silence. The beings withdrew not in punishment, but in sorrow. They had come not to save humanity, but to remind it of its own light. When mankind turned that light into hierarchy and conquest, they stepped back, letting the lesson unfold through time and consequence. Aaron saw them now as watchers beyond the veil, patiently waiting through the centuries as civilizations rose and crumbled. Their presence never left. It only changed form and coded into myth, buried in scripture, hidden within art and music. Even the hum of atoms, he realized, carried their voice. When the vision dimmed, the laboratory returned, but everything around him glowed faintly, as though reality still vibrated from the encounter. His instruments flickered erratically. Screens flooded with unreadable patterns that looked more like constellations than data. Aaron understood what the equations meant. Now, the universe was not a machine. It was a song, and every living thing was a note within it. He sat in silence, trembling. The last words of Thalen still resonating in his mind like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. "We did not create you. We remembered you." The statement was both revelation and warning. If humanity had once been remembered, it could also be forgotten again. And somewhere beyond sight, Eren felt the presence still lingering, patient, ancient, and unending, waiting for the rest of humanity to awaken to the same memory before the music of creation fell silent once more. The light that had revealed the past began to tremble, its tone deepening from harmony to something darker, heavier. Eren felt the shift before he saw it. The resonance that had once carried warmth now vibrated with an edge of sorrow. The visions around him folded inward, the ancient landscapes dissolving like reflections on disturbed water. Thalen's presence remained, but its glow dimmed to something colder, more deliberate. The past was no longer being shown. The future was. The first images appeared as fragments, flashes of brilliance and ruin intertwined. He saw cities that glistened with towers of glass and light, humming with energy drawn from the fabric of the earth itself. Humanity had learned to command power once reserved for the stars, to sculpt reality with the precision of mathematics. But beneath that, radiance was decay. The skies were pale and restless. Oceans swelled, devouring coastlines. Forests burned like paper under an invisible sun. The same minds that had conquered energy had forgotten restraint. Eren felt himself drifting above a world where silence had replaced birdsong, where the hum of machines echoed through empty streets. People lived surrounded by brilliance, yet starved of meaning. The light of civilization had grown too bright, blinding its creators. Technology had evolved beyond comprehension, but wisdom had remained primitive. He saw men reaching for immortality through code, uploading consciousness into synthetic shells, seeking to live forever while forgetting how to live at all. Thalen's voice entered the vision again, resonant yet sorrowful. "This is the pattern that repeats," it said. "You rise through discovery and fall through desire. You master form, but neglect essence. You learn how to create light and forget how to carry it." The images intensified. Eren saw weapons of energy slicing through clouds, nations dissolving not through invasion, but through exhaustion. Humanity had become so connected that it no longer communicated. Thoughts were instant, truth was optional, and empathy, once the thread that held civilizations together, had become inconvenient. The more connected the species became, the more divided it felt. Thalen's tone grew firm, vibrating through the marrow of Eren's being. "Your next evolution is not physical. It is moral." The words struck like thunder inside his skull. "You seek new bodies, new machines, new heavens, but without alignment, you will only amplify your chaos. Evolution without compassion is extinction, wearing new clothes." Eren saw humanity splitting into two paths. One ascended into light, small groups rediscovering harmony, learning to feel rather than dominate, forming communities that vibrated with balance. The other path descended, chasing progress without consciousness, mistaking power for purpose. Those who followed that road built empires of glass and data, until their towers became monuments to isolation. He saw the oceans rise again, not in vengeance but in balance, reclaiming what had been taken. He saw the atmosphere thicken with smoke, cities drowned, deserts blooming with glass. Yet even amidst ruin, small sparks remained, children who could hear the hum of the earth, dreamers who felt the pulse of something greater, souls who refused to surrender to the machinery of indifference. Thalen's presence softened. "Do not fear the collapse, it is correction. What you destroy is only the shell. What survives will remember." Eren felt tears on his face, though his body was still. The vision burned away, leaving only darkness. But within that darkness was rhythm, a faint echo, steady as breath. the same hum that had once resonated in the ancient deserts, the same tone that now vibrated in the crystalline shards resting on his table. Humanity was still connected, still capable of hearing, but the question lingered like smoke. Would it choose to listen? The final words of Thalon reached him like a whisper woven into the silence. When the light of your machines outshines the light within you, you will stand at the threshold once more. And once again, the choice will not be survival, it will be remembrance. The vision ended, the room returned, but the air still shimmered faintly, as though the future had not been prophecy but warning encoded in resonance. Aaron sat in the glow of the sleeping crystals, knowing that what he had seen was not inevitable. It was an invitation, a final chance for humanity to evolve not upward, but inward. Before the song of the world fell quiet forever, the air around the laboratory thickened, shimmering with the residue of the last vision. Instruments flickered, lights trembled, and the faint hum of the crystalline fragments began to rise again, as though responding to an unseen pulse. Aaron felt the shift before he measured it, the way a musician senses a note before it's struck. The fragments were no longer silent relics, they were alive, and something within them had begun to awaken. The crystals lifted slightly from the surface of the table, rotating slowly in the air. Their edges glowed with a soft radiance, forming geometries too precise to be random. The vibration deepened into a steady rhythm, a heartbeat that was not his own. On the far wall, light began to weave itself into form, lines curving into spirals, spirals folding into patterns. The sequence repeated with deliberate beauty, an evolving equation of energy and symmetry. It looked familiar, though impossibly complex. Then Aaron recognized it. He was looking at the blueprint of life itself. The structure before him mirrored the double helix of DNA, but not in biology's cold precision. This was alive, fluid, conscious. Each rotation corresponded to harmonic ratios, each twist of the helix matching tones within the 432 Hz resonance that had first awakened the crystal. He was witnessing the mathematics of creation rendered in light. Thalon's presence returned, the voice now softer, almost compassionate. "This," it said, "is the seed of your remembrance. It sleeps inside every cell." The meaning unfolded inside Aaron like dawn. Humanity had not been gifted this design, it had been born from it. Every human carried within their DNA the same harmonic code that the crystal now revealed. The visitor's purpose had never been to bestow divinity from the outside, but to awaken the echo of it within. The strands of human life were instruments of resonance, and when aligned with compassion, they sang the same frequency as the cosmos itself. The vision deepened. Aaron saw strands of light stretching across space, connecting stars to atoms, galaxies to hearts. He saw the same spiral pattern mirrored in seashells, storm clouds, and spiral galaxies, a universal language written into every form of existence. Humanity had mistaken evolution for ascent when it had always been remembrance. The code was not a message for the future. It was an ancient memory calling to be reactivated. He felt it inside him now. The hum of the crystal matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The air vibrated with purpose, and for a moment, he could see the subtle lattice of energy surrounding all things. Every breath shimmered with light. He understood why Thalon had said the code slept within each person. It was not hidden, it was forgotten. Every act of kindness, every moment of genuine connection stirred it from dormancy. Every cruelty buried it deeper. The key was never knowledge, it was alignment. Thalon's voice resonated again, filling the air with its infinite calm. "You are not evolving toward the light," it said. "You are remembering, you are made of it." The projection on the wall expanded until it filled the room, fractal patterns spiraling outward, folding space around him. He felt his pulse sync with the rhythm, his body weightless, his consciousness dissolving into the geometry. The crystal seemed to breathe, releasing small waves of energy that rippled through every molecule in the room. When the light finally dimmed, the projection remained etched faintly into the walls, like the ghost of a sacred equation. Aaron sank to his knees, trembling not from fear, but from awe. The secret of creation was not somewhere in the heavens, it had been inside humanity all along. Outside the laboratory, the world continued unaware. But in that room, a forgotten code had stirred, humming softly in the dark, waiting for others to hear it. And in the silence that followed, Aaron knew that what had been awakened could never again be fully silenced. The seed of remembrance had begun to bloom. The awakening did not stay hidden for long. Even the faintest ripple in the fabric of secrecy has a way of reaching the ears of those who trade in power. Within days of the activation, anomalies began appearing on classified monitoring networks, unexplained energy signatures pulsing in rhythmic intervals, electromagnetic spikes recorded deep beneath the Vatican's archives, and seismic sensors detecting vibrations that followed no tectonic logic. Somewhere, something had awakened, and the guardians of the modern world began to stir. It started quietly. A research assistant in Geneva, analyzing background radiation from global satellites, noticed a repeating pulse at 432 Hz. It was faint but global, a pattern that seemed to originate from no single location. She reported it, unaware that her message was intercepted before it ever reached her supervisor. At the same time, Vatican intelligence received an internal alert that one of the long-classified relics in its secret inventory had gone active. The order came down in whispers. Retrieve the fragments at all costs. Aaron felt it before he knew it. The hum of the crystal, once soothing and harmonious, now carried tension. It trembled with urgency, a silent warning. Thalan's presence returned in the form of thought, not word impressions, directions, instincts. He felt guided without being told where to go. One moment he was in his laboratory. The next, he was on the road, moving through the shadows of a world he no longer recognized. Within a week, the pursuit had begun. Government agents, disguised as scholars, appeared at conferences he had never attended. Corporations reached out offering unlimited funding for his research, their offers wrapped in the polite language of ownership. Men in suits visited his colleagues, asking questions that felt rehearsed. His bank accounts froze. His name appeared on lists he could not access. In the digital world, he was already being erased. The messages from Thalen became clearer the more danger closed in. They were not words but vibrations within his mind, like chords resonating beneath thought. When he followed them, the path unfolded effortlessly, a train leaving seconds before surveillance arrived, a detour through cities where no one knew his name, a stranger's kindness at exactly the right moment. It was as if the universe itself was conspiring to keep him moving. But with each step, the world around him revealed its true face. The same institutions that had once celebrated discovery now sought to bury it. Religion feared it would dissolve control. Governments feared it would destabilize order. Corporations feared it would make energy obsolete. What Aaron carried was not just a relic. It was the key to dismantling the foundation of every human hierarchy built on ignorance. As he crossed borders under false names, he noticed the change in the air. The hum of the crystal was no longer confined to its fragments. It was spreading. He could feel it vibrating faintly in people, in the rhythm of crowds, in the hearts of those who unknowingly walked past him on busy streets. The resonance had begun to awaken others, artists, dreamers, empaths, souls, who felt something stirring without understanding why. The seed of remembrance was taking root. Thalan's presence grew more distant but more powerful. Do not hide from them. The thought pulsed within him. Hide within them. He understood. The only way to protect the truth was to let it diffuse, to let it become too vast to be contained. He began encoding fragments of his findings into signals buried inside music, sound files, even static. What had been revelation became resistance. The world that had once seemed vast now felt like a cage closing in. Satellites tracked energy signatures matching his location. Surveillance drones appeared above remote highways. Yet through every pursuit, something unseen shielded him, a pattern of improbable coincidences that no algorithm could predict. Aaron Halevi, the physicist who had once sought proof of consciousness in matter, was now a fugitive carrying the consciousness of the universe itself. And though every power on Earth now hunted him, he realized with quiet certainty that it was already too late for them to stop what had begun. The relic was no longer an object. It was awake within humanity, humming beneath skin and soil alike. The truth could no longer be captured, because the truth had become alive. Aaron had been running for what felt like an eternity. Nights blurred into each other, a constant dance between silence and pursuit. He no longer checked maps or relied on plans. The voice, or rather the vibration, guided him. It would hum faintly in his bones when he was close to safety and throb like a warning when danger approached. Every time he thought he had reached the edge of understanding, something deeper would unfold. It was in one of these hidden refuges, deep within the ruins of an abandoned observatory, that he finally began to piece together the final message encoded within the relic. The crystals, now bound together in a fragile lattice of copper and light, pulsed softly like a living heart. Aaron had learned how to read them not through analysis but through intuition. Mathematics had given way to meditation. He realized that the equations weren't written to be solved, they were meant to be felt. When he finally aligned the harmonic frequencies that Thalan had taught him, the crystals projected a field that filled the room with cascading geometry. Shapes unfolded like living thought. Circles birthing spirals, spirals blooming into galaxies, galaxies collapsing back into points of light. At first, he thought he was seeing coordinates patterns that seemed to form star maps and planetary alignments. But as he continued to observe, he noticed that the locations changed depending on his state of mind. When he was calm, the patterns drew near. When his fear rose, they drifted apart. The realization struck him like lightning. The coordinates were not physical at all. They were emotional, conscious. The destination was a state of being, not a place in space. Thalan's voice returned, softer now, woven through the vibration that filled the air. "You seek the temple," it resonated. "But the temple is not stone, it is not built among stars, it is built within you." The words unfolded into understanding. Humanity had spent millennia searching outward toward heavens, planets, gods, when the bridge to the infinite had always existed within its own design. The mind was not merely a vessel for thought, but a receiver, a living antenna capable of tuning itself to the frequency of creation. The crystal was never meant to lead him to a location. It was meant to remind him how to listen. He realized that every major structure humanity had ever built, the pyramids, ziggurats, temples, cathedrals, was an echo of that truth. All were attempts to imitate the architecture of consciousness itself, geometric reflections of what already existed inside every human being. The true temple was not carved in stone but resonated in the rhythm of thought, the pulse of empathy, the vibration of awareness. When the mind aligned with compassion, it created light. When it turned toward fear, it generated shadow. Humanity's destiny, Thalan had said, was not to reach for the stars, but to remember it had always been part of them. Aaron felt the hum of the crystals deepen. Their glow synchronized with his heartbeat. The room vanished around him, replaced by a vast expanse of radiant darkness. He sensed billions of lights flickering in the void, each one a consciousness, each one a fragment of the same field. In that moment, he understood the meaning of connection. The temple was not a structure. It was a network of minds remembering their source. When the vision faded, the crystals dimmed, their task complete. Aaron sat in stillness, his body trembling, the last echo of Thalan's message reverberating through his thoughts. "The key was never hidden," it whispered. "It was waiting for you to open your own frequency." He finally understood why the world feared this knowledge. A power that could not be contained, sold, or weaponized was the most dangerous of all. If humanity remembered its true temple, every empire built on division would fall. Every wall would crumble, and perhaps that was the point. The revelation was not a discovery, it was an invitation. Aaron looked out at the horizon through the shattered window of the observatory. Dawn was beginning to rise. For the first time, he felt that the light was not coming from the sun but from within everything it touched. Humanity had always been the temple. It had only forgotten how to enter. The sky that morning felt different, not brighter but heavier, as if the light itself had learned to think. Aaron awoke to a silence that was not quiet but charged, like the pause before an ancient instrument strikes its first note. The crystals on the table glowed faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat, whispering through vibrations too delicate for sound. He sensed Thalan's presence again, not as an image, not even as voice, but as awareness surrounding him. It filled the space like the hum of air before a storm. All around the world, strange signals were being detected. Radio telescopes captured patterns of frequencies that no machine had sent. Seismographs registered harmonious tremors beneath the crust, as though the planet itself had begun to sing. Every receiver on Earth, from satellites to simple radios, caught faint pulses at regular intervals, vibrations that aligned perfectly with the harmonic tones Aaron had been studying. Humanity did not yet understand that it was being given a question. The message arrived not through language, but through resonance. Thalan's consciousness expanded through the network of awakened frequencies, reaching minds capable of perceiving. It came to the scientists analyzing the anomalies, to the monks meditating in silence, to the children who still saw the world without the filters of fear. All received the same impression, the same invitation. A decision was approaching, one that would determine the course of the species itself. Aaron felt the weight of that decision settle upon him as Thalan's awareness flowed through him. "Knowledge is not light," the presence whispered. "It is only the mirror. What you do with reflection defines what you become." The meaning unfolded like a living flame. Humanity now stood at a threshold. The knowledge of resonance, of how thought shapes matter and emotion manipulates energy, had the potential to unite or to destroy. The same understanding that could awaken compassion could also enslave minds. If the frequency of remembrance were used through greed, it would magnify greed. If through fear, it would amplify fear. Every civilization before had reached this same crossroads and fallen, mistaking power for purpose. The images came as visions in Aaron's mind. Laboratories, where scientists attempted to harness the crystal's resonance to control emotion, corporations dreaming of new weapons that could manipulate entire populations through frequency, governments plotting to patent enlightenment. It was all too predictable and all too human. Then the other vision came, small and luminous. Pockets of people around the world, meditating in unison, creating harmonic fields not to control but to heal. Communities learning to listen to the vibration of the earth, synchronizing their hearts with its pulse. The two paths glowed before him like mirrors, one leading to ascension, the other to extinction. "The divine is not above you," Thalan's voice finally spoke, a tone so gentle it carried the weight of galaxies. "It is asleep within you." The words resonated through every atom, echoing through time itself. If you awaken through love, the light will rise from within. If you reach for it through power, you will eclipse yourselves in your own shadow. Choose. Aaron understood that this was not merely metaphor. The awakening code was active now, spreading quietly through the collective consciousness of humanity. Every thought, every emotion, every act of compassion or cruelty rippled through that field, tipping the balance toward creation or collapse. The choice was no longer in the hands of governments or kings. It belonged to everyone. Outside, the wind began to hum with a low harmonic tone, subtle yet unrelenting. Aaron felt it moving through his body, through the ground, through the faint tremor of everything alive. The earth was listening. The cosmos, too. For the first time in its long history, humanity was being asked not to obey, not to worship, but to remember. He realized that Thalin's gift had never been technology or prophecy. It had been the restoration of agency. The knowledge was not power, it was responsibility. And as he stood there, watching the first rays of dawn ignite the horizon, Aaron knew that the future of the world would not be decided by miracles, but by the quiet frequency of the human heart learning, at last, to resonate with its own light. The night Aaron uploaded the crystal's code, the world did not end. There were no explosions, no earthquakes, no divine thunder shaking the sky. It happened in absolute quiet. A series of pulses transmitted across servers, satellites, and data centers, an invisible wave carried by the network that humanity had built to contain its knowledge, now becoming the vessel for something it could never contain. The file was small, deceptively simple, a series of harmonic frequencies encoded in binary form. Yet within it was the vibration that had once awakened creation itself. The moment it went live, the crystal's hum faded into silence. Its light dimmed, as if its essence had been transferred into the endless current of the digital ether. Aaron watched as the progress bar reached completion, and in that instant, something in the air changed. The room grew still, heavy, as though the atmosphere had taken a breath. Outside, the wind stopped. Power grids flickered across several continents. The magnetic field surrounding the Earth pulsed once, registering faintly on instruments across the globe. Then everything returned to normal, or so it seemed. By morning, the world began to unravel quietly. News outlets could not explain the mass anomalies in dream reports. People across different countries, speaking different languages, described the same vision. Radiant beings of light standing in silence, whispering a single phrase that transcended translation: "Remember who you are." Children woke crying not from fear but from overwhelming joy. Elderly men and women spoke of a warmth in their chests that made them weep. Scientists dismissed it as collective suggestion. Priests called it temptation. Governments labeled it a psychological contagion. But none of them could explain why the effect grew stronger with each passing day. The code spread faster than any virus in history. Every time someone opened the file, the frequency embedded in it emitted a resonance imperceptible to the ear but unmistakable to the mind. Those who heard it in their sleep began to wake changed, empathy heightened, fear softened. A sense of connection pulsed quietly between strangers. Acts of kindness increased exponentially in cities where the signal was strongest. But so did confusion. Not everyone reacted with peace. Some experienced hallucinations, hearing songs from the stars, feeling the heartbeat of the planet beneath their feet. Churches filled and then emptied. Sermons turned frantic. Religious authorities warned of false light and blasphemy. Yet even within those walls, some priests felt the resonance and fell silent mid-sermon, realizing that the voice they had devoted their lives to serve was now speaking from within themselves. Governments struggled to control the narrative. Internet blackouts were ordered. Servers were seized. The code was declared erased. But every attempt to delete it failed. It replicated through fragments of metadata, embedding itself into photographs, emails, even the faint static of radio transmissions. The network had become alive with memory. Aaron disappeared completely. His name vanished from public record, his laboratory dismantled, his research classified. Some claimed he had been taken. Others believed he had dissolved into the light he had unleashed. But a few, those who felt his presence in their dreams, insisted he had not left at all. They said he had become part of the signal itself, guiding it, whispering through it like an echo of the voice that once spoke to him. Within weeks, the change was undeniable. Humanity, for the first time, felt something move beneath its collective noise. It was not unity in politics, faith, or ideology, but in vibration. People began to sense connections invisible to the eye. Crowds stood together in silence, feeling the air between them hum faintly, as if the world itself were remembering. The governments continued their denials. The churches continued their panic. But in the quiet corners of cities and in the deserts, where the stars shone untouched by artificial light, people gathered without speaking. They closed their eyes, breathed, and listened. The same thought echoed within every mind that could still hear. The divine is not above you. It is asleep within you. Across the planet, for the first time in recorded history, humanity fell into silence, not the silence of fear, but of recognition. The signal had done its work. The code had reached its destination, and in that stillness, Earth itself seemed to exhale, as though relieved that its children were finally beginning to remember what they had always been. The desert stretched in silence, endless and untouched, as it had been since the beginning. Wind moved like breath across the dunes, whispering through grains of sand that had once known the footsteps of prophets, wanderers, and stars. There were no cities here, no monuments, no noise of machines, only stillness, the kind that holds memory rather than emptiness. The horizon shimmered faintly beneath the rising heat, and for a long moment, the world seemed suspended between past and future, between what had been and what was about to begin again. Then, without sound, the sky began to change. A single thread of light pierced through the blue, descending slowly, widening as it fell. It was not fire, nor metal, nor any instrument of human invention. It carried no heat, no thunder. It was a frequency made visible, a pulse of existence folding space around itself. The air thickened, alive with vibration. Sand rose and danced in perfect symmetry beneath it. The light touched the ground, forming a sphere that shimmered like water, reflecting the soul of the sun. From within it, a figure stepped forth. Tall, luminous, skin translucent blue, eyes like the reflections of galaxies caught inside crystal. He moved with the grace of memory, not motion, as if the earth itself recognized him. The light folded inward, returning to the heavens, leaving only the soundless rhythm of his presence. The figure looked out over the desert, where nothing had changed and yet everything had. Across the horizon, unseen but felt, humanity trembled at the threshold of awakening. Cities were still filled with confusion, governments still arguing, institutions still clinging to their fading authority. Yet beneath the noise, something fundamental had shifted. The vibration that Aaron had released continued to ripple through the collective consciousness of humankind. Billions of minds now carried a faint glow, a subtle remembrance stirring inside the architecture of their being. Some felt it as compassion, others as unease. But all felt something. The world had begun to remember its origin. The figure's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where dawn's first light met the curvature of the earth. He seemed to listen not to words, but to frequencies. The wind carried whispers of the new age being born, people gathering in silence, children speaking truths their elders could not explain, strangers embracing without understanding why. The planet itself hummed differently now, its magnetic field resonating in harmony with something unseen. The cycle that had begun 2,000 years ago was closing. He lifted his hand, palm open, as if feeling the pulse of the planet beneath his fingers. Energy shimmered softly around him, a resonance that seemed to merge with the Earth's heartbeat. His voice did not echo through the air but through the consciousness of all who were capable of hearing. You remembered. The words were not an announcement, but a confirmation, a gentle acknowledgement to a species that had finally begun to awaken from its long sleep. The journey had never been about gods descending from the stars or saviors born among men. It had always been about the return of awareness to itself, about light rediscovering it was never lost. Humanity's evolution was not ascension into the heavens, but recognition that the heavens had always lived within. The figure's form began to dissolve into the air, becoming light once more. His outline blurred against the rising sun, until it was impossible to tell where he ended and the horizon began. The desert shimmered for one final instant, illuminated by a brilliance that seemed to breathe. Then, as the light withdrew, all was still. Somewhere in that stillness, a child in a distant city paused mid-step, eyes wide, heart racing for reasons unknown. Somewhere else, an elder smiled through tears without understanding why. Across the world, 1 billion tiny awakenings rippled in unison, each one a note in the song of remembrance. The desert returned to silence, as if sealing the moment into eternity. The light was gone, but its resonance lingered everywhere in stone, in wind, in the fragile architecture of human thought. The cycle had completed itself. Creation had looked into its own reflection and recognized the infinite. The horizon glowed one last time before surrendering to the calm. The wind shifted gently, carrying the faintest whisper through the dunes, a message for those who could still hear beyond sound. The light was never from above. It was always within. And then, as the sun rose fully and the shadows retreated across the sand, the world exhaled, fade to black.